Hello, good evening, everybody. I'm Adam Smith, and welcome to tonight's Dementia Researcher Salon webinar. This evening, we're focusing on something that's vital but often undervalued in research, the role of coaching in leadership. We tend to think a lot about mentoring, which is and helping people develop over the long term, but coaching's a bit different. It's more focused, more immediate. It's about helping someone work through specific challenges to gain clarity and take the next steps forward with confidence. In a high pressure place like dementia research, developing these kind of skills can make the massive difference. And for our colleagues and teams and for ourselves. And as you know, in the salon, we often talk about research and career topics. So this evening is very much in the career space. And I'm joined by two brilliant speakers. We have welcoming back for the second time in the salon. That we have Professor Michael Coleman from the University of Cambridge, whose work on neurodegeneration is matched only by his commitment to team development. And we also have Dr. Kalisha Johnson from Emory University, who combines dementia care research with a strong focus on supporting early career researchers in an inclusive academic leadership place. Oh, both your cameras came on and went again. That's strange. For those who are new to the salon, let me just run through how the format works. We invite each of our speakers. We'll talk for 10 minutes. They haven't been given a massive briefing in advance. They've kind of been given the topic and left to their own devices to say, hey, interpret this how you like. So it's always interesting to see what they've come up with, and people interpret topics differently. But each of them will present for 10 minutes, and then we'll have a chance to take your questions, and we'll have a chat at the end. And we very much encourage everybody to contribute as well, to share your experiences and views on this too. But for now, that's enough from me. I should shut up and hand over to Kalisha, who's very patiently waiting and wearing her t-shirt, and I've let the side down. Well, do you know what? I will next week. I will have my t-shirt on. We're back next week talking about the importance of equity, diversity, and inclusion is next week's a topic we were just talking about. That's our topic for next week. So I will be wearing my t-shirt for that. But in the meantime, here's Kalisha. Thank you, Kalisha. Over to you if you'd like to share your screen. I'll stick around while you start that and see if that works. Okay.
Please stick around. Yes. And thank you for oh my goodness. It just went away. I tell y'all. They say come prepared. Where did my slides go? They just disappeared.
I have fun facts to fill dead air. Did you know, according to a 2022 report by Nature, over 60% of early career researchers say they lack formal leadership training. They don't get it.
I believe that to be true. I probably would have been in that.
Work.
Okay.
Is it coming?
They're coming. They're coming. Yes, we are here. All right. Sorry about that. And we appreciate We do appreciate that information.
Over to you.
Thank you so much. I am Dr. Kalisha Johnson, and we are discussing coaching in academia, trying to make sure all of my boxes are where they need to be. Leading with heart in dementia research, because results matter, but so do relationships. So the landscape of dementia research we know is, starting the timer so I don't run over. It's an interesting, exciting place, I think, to be right now. We've got the identification of new biomarkers and trying to figure out better ways beyond spinal taps to identify individuals who may have the diagnosis of dementia earlier. We've got these new generation therapies and hopefully have what we're calling disease modifying agents. These are the spaces in which I do not work, but I know people are really, really excited around the biomarkers and the next generation therapies. And then I'm hoping, despite the current administration, that we are taking the opportunity to have a closer look at social determinants of health and health disparities and how those shape, influence individuals living with dementia, as well as the care partners and families that support them, because I do think it matters, and we can't continue to put all of the onus on the individual with the diagnosis and their families. There are these community, societal forces at play that make differences, noticeable differences in the health and well-being of individuals, which is where most of my research lives. So for those of you wondering about my research, it's still going. Prayers, happy thoughts, incense, whatever you do to get people going, I'm here for it because I'm just excited to do the work that I do and happy that I can still do it, but do recognize that it is an interesting time to be in this space. And so, but there is sort of this disconnect, right? That most researchers are trained in data and not dialogue. And so I will never forget part of the reason I decided to get a PhD and then also decided to focus specifically on the experiences of African American individuals as I identify as African American is that I was reading research and was baffled by some of the discussion and conjecture that happened around the results that I had read because I thought, this is not how I would have interpreted these findings. And I don't think my grandmother who raised me would have interpreted these findings this way or any of the older adults that I grew up around. And so it bothered me enough to where it was like data matters, but dialogue matters. And how are we telling the story of our data to the people whose lives we are directly influencing and affecting? And so leadership often defaults to authority, but not influence. And so I am Dr. Kalisha Bonds Johnson. I have a PhD, I have a master's in nursing, I have a bachelor's of science in nursing. I have quite a bit of authority when you think about it. But when I am discussing my work specifically focused on African American adult daughters caring for someone living with dementia, predominantly their parent living with dementia, I am African American. I am somebody's adult daughter, but I am not caring for a parent living with dementia. And so while I may have authority, I do not have influence in the same way. And I need to be really, really thoughtful in how I engage with and who I engage with. And so I do think there is a potential disconnect and ways for us as researchers, early careerists, to be better at engaging with the populations of interest, as well as engaging with our colleagues, friends, collaborators, mentors, and mentees. And so, what is coaching? I mean, it's active listening. Oftentimes, I find myself listening simply to respond. I'm listening only because I want to tell you this. I want you to stop talking so I can tell you the next thing. But in active listening, it really is about listening to hear their story, listening to hear what they are telling you in a way that you would be able to repeat it back. So you're actively engaging in it. It's not passive, it is intentional. And then asking powerful and curious questions. And so, what the curious part is what's most important to me, right? I think oftentimes as experts in the field, we are trained to know the answers, to anticipate what the hypothesis will be, to predict what the outcome should be without really being curious about what else could it be? What if I'm not truly the expert? What if what I'm thinking is way off base? And then offering developmental feedback. So I was reflecting on this presentation, and when I was in my PhD program, there was a situation where my main dissertation chair went to another university. And so our school's policy with it was that your dissertation chair had to be in the School of Nursing at this institution. And so I switched chairs to a mentor who I have been working with. She was my researcher. I was her research assistant. And so I remember there was a time where we were sort of having this miscommunication. Like I was thinking we were coming to have meetings about the dissertation. She was taking parts of that meeting to then discuss her research because I was her research assistant. And I remember sitting down with our program director at the time and being quite frustrated at the inability for us to move forward. And she said to me, research is always going to involve people, which means there are always going to be difficult conversations. And so she literally sat me down in our class. We used to have these seminar meetings where we would discuss different topics, work through writing challenges. And so during that session, she made me practice the difficult conversation of being able to say to my mentor at the time, I'm really having a hard time sort of juggling whether this is about your research or about my dissertation. Is it possible that we structure our meetings in a way that I know it's specifically about my dissertation or it's specifically about research. And if there's extra time, then maybe we could talk about one or the other. But the main focus of these meetings is X or Y. And it was powerful because I am now using that same sort of strategy as an assistant professor. I use it as a postdoc. I even use it in my own personal life. And so I think, having someone there that can help you see things in a different way is so powerful. So the coaching mindset is curiosity over control. I do like to be in control. I've discovered I'm not good at being a novice. I like to be the expert in the room. It works well for my personality. But I've always maintained a sense of curiosity because I recognize that I don't know everything. There are things I won't know unless I ask. And I need to be curious about someone's lived experience in their life if I really want to make interventions that contextually reflect what's going on for them. Presence over performance. I can perform for you all day long, but does my presence resonate? Does what I'm saying, does it hit the heartstrings? Do you care? Does it matter? And then reflection over reaction. And so I am one of those people that self-reflects probably way too much. I'm cognizant as an African-American Black woman walking into academic spaces of how much space I take up, of how people view me, of how I want to be viewed. And so as a result, I spend a lot of time self-reflecting, trying to make sure I present the way that I want to present, the way that my grandmother would be proud of, the way that I'm proud of. But that's a lot of work. And I've also discovered that most people don't self-reflect, either in research, in life, in our roles. And it's so important to pay attention to how you show up, how you say things, especially in research. What we're printing, what we're publishing gets out there and often can have negative effects on people and populations and policies and practices if we are not truly reflecting on it, and then also bringing that curiosity and remembering that we are not the expert on all things. And so we do sometimes need to have other people at the table. And why it matters in research, because it fosters psychological safety. Safety is hard, right? I like to say, we used to say we're creating safe spaces. I like to call them brave spaces, because in brave spaces, you feel brave enough to speak up or to say something. Safety is really hard to create, but we do want to, I think, be cognizant of the power that our research yields when it comes to practice and policy and populations, and that we are not negatively affecting the lives of people because we didn't take the time to really understand the experiences that they were going through. And in order to do that, we build authentic collaboration. So in my lab, I have a community advisory board that I work with, and I recognize that often they are the experts in this work because they are living this work. I got a little skin in the game, but this is exactly who they are. I remember talking to one of the influencers. Her name is Jessica Guthrie, and she was like, your research is my life. And so that matters, right? That hits different when someone says that to you, and wanting to make sure that we are doing this in a way that is thoughtful, that is kind, so that mindset has to shift so that we can navigate through uncertainty and avoid burnout. And there's barriers in academia, right? Because again, it's all about output. How much are you publishing? What grants are you getting? And very less about how are those grants and publications affecting the people in which we are referring to and talking about. The fear of appearing soft. I was telling them one earlier that this is often considered like a soft skill, the ability to talk and be coachable and learn and have sort of this idea that you can dialogue with different people, meet people where they are. But I think it's probably one of the hardest things to do. I mean, we call it a soft skill, but I think it's quite hard. And then time constraints, right? So any community engaged work, any thoughtful work takes time. It takes a lot of effort. It also takes money. And so as a result, there are these constraints around it. And I think that's part of the reason why people don't always do a good job. Slow moves, big shifts. So listen without fixing, especially if you're working in communities that are underserved or othered for any reason. Be present, do what they ask you to do, learn from them, ask open-ended questions, because we're always trying to be curious. Reflect back what you hear, because when we're processing it, we may not have processed it the right way. And so checking back with them, referring back to make sure we are doing what we need to do. And then the payoff is higher retention and satisfaction. It's more effective mentorship, but also it ends up making it where you are able to be coachable and people want to work with you. And then greater innovation through diverse thinking. So I'm huge about having different disciplines and diversity at the table because I don't want to create an echo chamber. I don't need yes men to say, oh, Kalisha, Dr. Barnes Johnson, that's great, that's right. No, I need people to challenge my thinking and to question me and to help me be better at it. And in my final moments, I'll say, try one coaching skill this week, probably from Michael, who, again, as we were referring and talking, and I'm grateful for the grace that we had and the latitude and kind of how we saw this topic and how we wanted to bring it to life, but really thinking about the self-reflection or are we actively listening? What are we doing to make sure that if you're doing work in communities, especially underrepresented communities, that you are not further harming them, that you are being thoughtful about the work that you're doing. And then you can notice the ripple effect because I've discovered in my own work, because I've been thoughtful, because I've been kind, that it's opened up other doors, because I've met people where they are, that they are also wanting to reach back and help me. And then keep repeating it, right? We'll say questions to the end. Thank you for your time.
I want to got my t-shirt. Michael said I found one. That was brilliant. Thank you so much, Kalisha. And you gave me a lot to think about there as well, because you kind of go into these things and think about coach as being this cat. And Michael has them too. Like, we're all rocking the t-shirts now.
I've got my sound on now as well, but it's in mirror writing.
Think about coach as a single person, but I love your mention there that your kind of coaches are also the people with lived experience who are participating in research, because we ask for evaluation, but I think we're not necessarily, particularly in academia, very good at doing that in a really timely way, which is right. Let's just look at that. I mean, whether that's in a lab and you're looking at experiments, or whether it's, immediately going, right, how did that go? Did that go well? What did we learn from this? What can we do differently next time? What didn't we have that we needed to make that better? And I love that is just as important for people who are working in that qualitative space, because they do things where you can draw on your lived experience people to give that feedback.
I think it's valuable.
Mm-hmm. And they're often more honest than we might be with us.
way too honest. So I have to temper myself every time, because I'm like, okay, I'm meeting with the community advisory board. They're a wonderful group of people, but they have no problems with telling me exactly what they think.
And how do you cope with that? Because we're not all very good at taking criticism, and coaching, as much as coaching is supposed to be, I guess, about you getting to think about your own performance and what you did. Yeah. How do you cope with that to make sure that it stays positive as a learning rather than becomes a criticism?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it has to do with my own self-reflection and my own work, because I know even when they say things. So for example, I developed my lab name, which was DECIDE, and it's an acronym, but I developed it before I had the community advisory board, and the E stood for engagement. And they were like, engagement? Who's getting married? What do you mean engagement? Like, don't you mean elder care? Because the work is around our elders. But in, a lot of aging spaces, elder care is not well received, even though in Black communities, elders are held in high regard. And so I had to work through that, and we decided on changing that E to elder care, because it really is focused on these older adults and how they are doing and making sure that they have the best care, because the work focuses on healthcare decision making. But yeah, they definitely came from my name.
So definitely a takeaway from that then was, so a coach can really be anybody who can help you with a specific skill, particularly with a skill. Rather, this isn't thinking big about careers and logistics. That's what mentors are for. Your coaches are people who are going to help you with specific things you need, with skills. I mean, that could be interview skills, but it could also be, learning something you don't know in your research, or giving you reflective advice. And I love that you can be your own coach, really, can't you? That you are your best own coach there. That's got you right. That's enough. Let's hear from Michael now, who's going to do his 10 minutes, and then we'll come back. And do remember to put your questions in the chat if you have any in there as well.
Good. Sorry about that hiatus, but yeah, I'm Michael Coleman. I'm at the University of Cambridge, and my group has worked with dementia research quite a lot over the years, but we've kind of spun that off a little bit currently with Claire Durant, who has set up her work in Edinburgh, working on human brain slices. But I'm still very much active in research in neurodegeneration in general, so I can give you some of my thoughts about the use of coaching in research. So yeah, next slide. So this is Adam Peaty. And when we think of coaching, one of the first things we usually think about is sport. We mentioned Formula One already. Adam Peter, in 2021, he had the 20 fastest times ever in the 100-meter breaststroke for men. And he was a double Olympic gold medalist. And then he ran into a lot of problems. He had injuries, he had some mental health issues, he had other things going on in his life. And his performance dropped massively. And he came back at the Paris Olympics and won a silver medal. If he hadn't been in the early stages of COVID, it turned out in the end he would have won, because he was 0.02 of a second off the gold medal for a third time. And this is absolutely unprecedented. Nobody's ever won even 3 medals at all in the Olympics before in this event. And the person behind that, was Mel Marshall, his coach. So basically, despite being absolutely at the top of his game, he didn't do that alone. Yep. This also, similarly in sport, is Keely Hodgkinson. She is the Olympic gold medalist in 800-meter running at the 2024 Paris Olympics. But again, she didn't do it alone. She first sort of came on to the high-profile international scene at the age of 19 in the Tokyo Olympics 3 years earlier, and because she won a silver medal, and because having performed at such a high level at the age of 19, everybody thought, oh, she's bound to win next time. And then she went to the World Championships the couple of times after that and got the silver medal again and again. And it looked like, oh God, is this going to be one of those stories of somebody who was nearly but not quite kind of story? But she came back and she won. But again, she didn't do it alone. She actually has 2 coaches, Trevor Painter and Jenny Meadows. Now, there's a couple of interesting facts here. So Mel Marshall is or was actually an Olympic swimmer herself, but not quite at the same level, of success as Adam Peaty. Jenny Meadows was also an Olympic international 800-meter runner, but again, the same story, not quite what Keely Hodgkinson has been doing. And Trevor Painter actually does have a background in sport, but it's in rugby league. And Trevor, back in the day, was actually Jenny Meadows' coach when she was a runner, an active runner as well. So this tells you something very important. It's not about the coach necessarily being better than the athlete or the coachee themselves. It's just someone who can give another perspective and someone that can give the support as they deal with all those other issues that are going on, the injuries, the illnesses, the other things in their life. So, yep. So here is a scientist. This could be you or me. If you're not yet at the stage of writing grants, maybe it's you planning your experiment. Maybe it's you applying for your next job. This guy didn't get his last grant. He was rejected. And there's other stuff going on in his life. His kids are ill. They're looking for a new place to live. He can't sort of dedicate 100% 24/7 to his work. But somehow he needs to find the brain bandwidth to focus absolutely fully on his grant and meet a deadline with the best grant he can write. So how does he do that? Why is it in academia, in research, we generally take that on by ourselves, and whereas in sport there's a culture more of coaching, having other people to support you. Yep. So you and me, when we're facing those kind of problems, Kalisha mentioned earlier, the idea about if some people are self-reflective, not everybody, but some people are. Many of us are. I certainly am, and I suspect most people who are interested in coaching are. But what we deal with in science, we deal with it by ourselves. We trundle off to the bookshop, we listen to podcasts, etc. But maybe there's another way. Yep. So at the start of the pandemic, I was doing exactly that. I was listening to podcasts, one of the many self-help things out there, thinking, oh God, what is happening in the world? What is going on? How do we deal with this? And this podcast said, now more than ever, you need a coach to deal with, the uncertainty, the chaos, the concerns of my and as a PI, I worry about the funding for the group and all sorts of things. You need someone to help you steer you through it. And I thought, that makes total sense to me. Who could I go to as a potential coachee? And I thought of this guy, Hugh Cairns. He's an Irish academic psychologist, but he happens to live in Adelaide in Australia. His business model for the small company he runs before the pandemic was to tour Europe, delivering courses and coaching to people in person around parts of Europe, including the UK. I'd never actually met him, but I thought, actually, well, he's got to basically find, he's going to be twiddling his thumbs at home now in the pandemic. So, maybe it's worth dropping him an email. And he got back to me and said, yeah, come and have a 15-minute taster session. And it clicked right away. And that chemistry is something I'll come back to that is really, really important to work. But with him, I was lucky and it really, really worked. And for several years and still occasionally, I met up with Hugh for an hour at a time online, and we talked through probably once a month for whatever was the current big issue, the current big strain I was dealing with. And I was really impressed with this coachee experience of the kind of things he did. Yep. And here is an example of what the kind of questions he would ask. And it's very, very much question driven, as we've heard already. Not somebody telling you what to do. It's someone asking questions that make you figure out what to do. So at one point I was considering a job advert that would have meant a much higher level of responsibility, some additional responsibilities that would go over and far over and above that in my own group. And I was thinking there's parts of this job I would really like and that I could really do well. There's parts of it I know I could do it, but I really wouldn't like. And I was trying to figure out, what should I do? Should I even, and because even to apply, it's a lot of time and emotional energy goes into the application. And I was thinking, should I go down that route, or should I just call it off? And I thought, I know, I'll speak to Hugh. And what he did was ask me just these 8 words. He said, what I want to know is, what will you give up to do this? He knew I was busy. And there's no way that I would just do it in my do the extra responsibility in my spare time. He said, what is it? Is it your personal life? Is it your other parts of your work, or what? And then he went totally silent. That's one of the skills of a good coach, to ask a question and then just, as somebody put it, be comfortable with silence. And that puts me on the spot, and I have to come up with an answer. And I'm sitting there in this silence. I've got one word going around in my head: research. I thought, there is no way I'm giving up research to do this other job. And I got my answer straight away. And that was such a powerful question, just 8 words. If anyone had told me I can't do that job or I won't enjoy it, I would not have listened to them. But he didn't do that. He made me come up with the answer. And there's something so powerful about hearing yourself say it and think it, even when you don't know it was there. Yep. This is the other organization I've worked with. This is a company run by Steve Peters, who's a famous sports psychologist that's worked with British cycling and certain other leading sports people. He started a small company called Chimp Management, and one of their mentors or coaches, Ben Davis, is somebody that I've worked with there. This is not so much about academia. These are not academics. Most of these have their background, as Ben himself is actually in sports. He coaches taekwondo people at the Olympics and so on. But I worked with him, and this was about managing your emotions in work and in general life. And a lot of what I talked about with Ben is, family stuff. I pay for these for myself. But there is this crossover thing between work and family. And that's one of the things that comes up a lot in coaching. It's never quite that we all live. We're not unique in a unique bubble by ourselves at work. We have things going on outside as well. And I've spoken also to Hugh about family issues as well. And yeah, here's an example of a question Ben asked me at one time. I was dealing earlier this year with some fairly major issues, health issues within my family, and they were taking a huge amount of my attention and my time, and I was need to figure out, you know, there's got to be a boundary here. There's, important as these are, other things in my life, and where do I draw the boundary between that and the rest of my life? And he asked me this question: how do you want to look back at this time in 5 years? Let's hope that, you know, the current issues are over at that point, but what do I want to do? Do I want to have left in my life, and what do I want to have still running well at that time, and therefore protect some of that right now? And that was a really clarifying question. Yep. So this is what I would say that I got out of these coaching experiences. Clarity. That's the biggest, most important word of all, to clarify, through making yourself come up with those thoughts, what's going on in your own head. Confidence, that I can deal with them, and motivation. There's nothing like intrinsic motivation, knowing it's come from within you. It's not somebody else's goal, it's yours. You really, really want it. And that's what really gives you the power to then go and pursue it. Yep. So I thought, on the back of that, I thought, this is amazing. This is not mentoring. Nobody's telling me advice. Nobody's giving me some kind of recipe for success. This is somebody helping me figure out my own answers. And so I thought, this is such a skill. I've got to have it. I want to train as a coach. So I looked around and I came up with in Cambridge, here at the part of Churchill College, the Moller Centre. They offered a short course, couple of months for trainee coaches. This guy, Keith Nelson. So I joined one of their course late last year. Yep. And here are some of the things that I found. Adam, there's quite a few steps here in these text slides. I'm just going to put my hands up each time. Yeah, that's fine. So the first thing I found is chemistry matters. I've already referred to that with Hugh Kearns. He clicked on that occasion. We did a lot of sort of cross coaching between different people of the group. That really, really matters. You also can't truly coach your own team. And that was a bit of a shock, a bit disappointing. Yep. Because that was one of the reasons I wanted to do it. I want to be able to give this, benefits of this to my own team. The problem with coaching your own team is there is always a bit of a conflict of interest, because your interests are always tied up with those of the team. The coach really does have to be independent, but also the team members will always, at some level, no matter what conversation you have, they will always at some level want to impress you, because they will know that you have some degree of control or power over their future career. And there's no way of getting rid of that. So a coach really it's at its best when it's independent of your team. However, you can have coaching like conversations with your own team and ask those kind of same penetrating questions. You just have to have that kind of declaration of interest at the end. I also found when we were practicing coaching, if I turned up stressed, which let's say at the beginning was like 90% of the time, it didn't go well. I have to be calm. And these days I put aside 30 minutes in my diary at least beforehand to make sure I've got time to get grounded and get calm. Because that's when it goes well. I'm thinking too much about my own issues, too much trying to get on with it. I've got to be absolutely in that space for the other person. Yep. You've got to stay out of what's called advice mode. This is slipping back into mentoring. Yep. Yep. And yeah, Adam. Yeah. So this guy, Michael Bungay-Stani, is another Australian, and he wrote in a couple of books about it. He calls this your advice monster. You have to tame your advice monster. You must stay curious longer. Keep asking questions. Try to genuinely understand this person in a non-judgmental way, to understand what's driving them. Help them understand what's driving them that they may not know themselves. And that's the best thing, is to stay out of advice mode. Stay curious. Yep. You've got to challenge their beliefs. That's one of the most important things. We all have beliefs that govern what we deal with, what we do in everyday life. It doesn't necessarily reflect what's good for us. There's sometimes habits that we've brought from childhood that no longer serve us. There's sometimes other people's views that we've not really thought through. You need to challenge those beliefs and make people rethink them. Yeah. You don't have to be an expert. It helps maybe to have a little bit of insight into that field. So the guy who was a rugby league player previously could coach an 800-meter runner, and one scientist can coach another scientist in another field of science without any major issues. But you do not have to be an expert in that field. So Steve Peters actually, he makes all sorts of jokes about the actual sports of the people he works with. He works with Rodney O'Sullivan, the world champion snooker player, and Steve would say, "Oh, it's just hitting balls with sticks." He's not talking about the technical side of it. He's talking about the psychological side of being able to do that. Yep. Adam? Yeah. You bring perspective, you help people see it from another perspective. Yeah. And you must practice. It gets better every time as you practice. Yeah, next slide. And so as a coachee then, for you, for example, if you're considering taking up some getting some coaching, what are some of the things you need to think about? Well, first of all, you have to find one. You have to figure out a way to fund it. Most people, if they're giving their own time, would like some kind of compensation for it. Sometimes within an organization, like within a university, that can be considered as part of the job. However, you've then got that potential for conflict of interest. It has to be outside their own group, ideally outside the same department, where you might know the corresponding PI, and someone may be reticent about giving too much away about what they may be struggling with. It's much better if it's totally independent. Funding, that's an issue. For people in mid-career, perhaps you may be able to afford funding yourself, and it's worth thinking about it as a potential investment in yourself. For people at early career, it's absolutely understandable. It's harder to do. The coaching I've paid for is maybe £110, £114 for an hour or so. So that's quite a outlay for a student or a postdoc. However, there are some organizations that will help with that. A number of funders, some universities actually pay for schemes that do that. The other thing to consider is someone who's doing coaching as a trainee that has to do a certain amount of coaching experience to get through that course. And by the way, I will be doing the advanced course at the Moller Centre in from October this year, and there's quite a lot of coaching I have to do for that. So that, there's things like that to get these things for free. But then you have to bear in mind you're still dealing with the trainee. Yep. This is really important advice. Play full out. As a coachee, absolutely engage with it. Switch your phone off, switch your email off. Give yourself also 10-15 minutes beforehand to absolutely get in the mindset for it. Get the maximum from it that you can. You do not want other things on your mind during that time to get the most from it. Yep. And do the work, as Steve Peters would say. Yep. This is Ronnie O'Sullivan, one of Steve's clients that's worked with him. Steve tells this very, very interesting story. He says, Steve was once in the middle of doing a presentation to a business or something. And in the middle of this, his mobile phone rang. It's Ronnie on the other end. Ronnie, as many of you will know, he's an absolutely world-class, amazing snooker player, possibly the greatest of all time in that field. But he has struggles a lot with kind of the emotional side of that. He's in a bit of a mess sometimes. Ronnie rang up. "Oh, I'm in a mess, Steve. What can I do?" And Steve's in the middle of a talk. And Steve said, "Are you doing the work, Ronnie? Are you reviewing what we talked about last time? Are you putting it into practice?" And Ronnie said, "No, I'm not." And Steve said, "Do the work, Ronnie, and ring me back when you've done it." And he put the phone down on him. He said, Ronnie rang him back a couple of days later, said, "I've done the work, Steve. It's going really, really well now." You have to keep thinking of this, not something the coach doesn't do it for you. You have to do the work yourself. You have to kind of review, prepare, and so on. Yeah. One topic per session. Don't try to put in too much. Otherwise, you'll be amazed how deeply you may want to go in what's behind that, and in person if possible. You can do it online. It can work quite well online. I've never met Hugh Kearns in person, for example, but the in-person works better if you have that option, if it's in the same town, for example. Yeah. And finally, I'll leave you with some of these resources, some of the things I've talked about. Feel free to take a photograph of this slide, nothing confidential there. And I'll leave you to that and take questions. Thanks.
You, Michael. I love that you've kind of professionally engaged with this process as well, both, taking on board, seeking out that support, even if you've had to kind of pay for it, and learning those skills yourself. And it's an interesting point you make about whilst you can provide mentorship to other people potentially in your team, but you can't provide the coaching in the same way.
I wouldn't say you can't do anything. It does change the way it has changed the way I approach my own group. But you can never be quite like it can for somebody where you are totally independent. If somebody comes to you and says, but one thing they cannot come to me and say is that I'm having difficulty with my supervisor, right? So straight away, there's ground you cannot touch. And they probably won't want to come to me and say, I'm thinking of leaving research. They may do. I'd like to think we're open enough about that. But you've got to be able to have that conversation in a totally non-judgmental way. And not to tell them what the answer is, but to help them figure it out for themselves with all the sort of insight into themselves to figure it out.
Which I think that is where you slip into mentoring, isn't it? Because it must, I mean, I don't know, how do you learn those skills? Because we're all, it's coming from a good place, because all too often we want to help, right? Don't we? I mean, I'm a mentor for a few people, and I'm forever saying, oh, I'll introduce you to this person. And have you thought about doing this? Yeah. And you're constantly making these suggestions, whereas coaching is that different mindset.
Yeah, mentoring absolutely has its place as well, but they are at two very, very different things. Yeah.
I mean, what other signs do you think, if you're in a leadership position, that somebody needs some coaching, even if they haven't asked? And how do you maybe suggest this?
Good question. You cannot make people want it. First of all, they've got to have that self-reflective thing that we talked about earlier. Somebody that works. The other phrase I heard once is you've got to. It's about somebody who wants to work on their job, not just in their job. They want to look at how they do it, how they may improve it, and so on. It's got to be that kind of mindset. It's got to be somebody that's typically people who would go down the self-help trail, which is, I think, it's about 50%. I think on the whole, it's amazing how many people do say that's what I want to do. That I just find myself doing it, and that mindset usually means they would want it. I think it's much better just to offer it. You cannot impose it on somebody.
I mean, this is why we kind of often talk about coaching in that mindset of self-help, don't we?
Yeah.
It's kind of, and when you said you went down the podcast rabbit hole, and I know you can do the same on YouTube, is kind of going down that self-help route, that there are a lot of resources out there that allow you to think about coaching as that holistic view of life, and then on those specific skills and things that we talked about before.
Yeah.
You both welcome to answer on this. How do we avoid toxic positivity while encouraging coaching? Because we do tend to be kind of, we avoid saying, oh, you're the coach you said who said, have you done the work? No, and then hung up on him. I don't think you'd have a problem with that. But trying to, balance that kind of being positive whilst also, because some of the things that coaching might need you to act upon are tough, right? I mean, you calling you out on your BS, that you're not working, you're not trying, you're not doing what you should be doing, or you haven't learned. Have you had that experience, either of you? Either been called out or having to balance that positivity with the negativity?
I mean, of course, life is like that, right? I am one of those people that tends to be the half the glass is half full. That's just how I have to operate. That's how I see the world. But that would imply that the glass is also half empty. And so I think when we come at it from oh, this is just rainbow. This is what I like to say. It's not exactly appropriate because it's more about my family. They live in what I like to call fantasy island, where things are not real. Doesn't matter how many times we work through this same scenario. I know how it's going to end. You know how it's going to end. But for some reason, they have this different ending. And I think while that's all fine and good for them, that isn't reality. And so we want to be positive as mentors, as leaders, as PIs, as individuals leading labs. But the reality is, do my lab members see me not positive? Yes, they do. Right now is a moment, is a season where I am not thrilled about all the things on my plate. And I'm okay with sharing that with them. And I'm also in a point where I'm like, I also recognize that I'm not my best self. So who can I seek out to help me navigate through this season of not being my best self? Who can coach me through this? But I also like for people under me to see it too, because I think society would have you believe that women are always docile and kind. Not Black women. White women predominantly are docile and kind. Black women get a whole different stereotype in the United States. But at the end of the day, I do think society would have you believe that we do have to always put forward this positive, life is good, I'm just happy to have a job mindset, when that is not real. Sometimes I am upset and sometimes I'm very angry. And I think that's okay to express in a respectful and calm way, and to be able to reflect to the students and mentees and people coming up under me or working alongside me that today is not a good day. I'm not my best self, but I have strategies, self-help strategies, as well as coaching and a little bit of therapy, not even gonna lie. As Michael was talking, I'm like, I talked to my therapist earlier today and we talked about some of these things that he's talking about. With coaching being slightly different, I do recognize that. But a good therapist also will allow you to work through things, give you the right questions, set it up in a way that allows you to come up with the answer. And so I think, yes, I want to be positive, but every day isn't always positive. And
No.
to be able to show that.
And therapy is something we're not really adopted particularly well in the UK. We're not very, it's not widely used. I was thinking about this myself. Michael, I might be stealing your answer to this, but I was thinking about framing it.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah. I think as long as
I can't hear.
Oh, okay. As long as we stick to the facts, you know,
It
you
stopped
avoid
when Kalisha hit mute. I'll go out and in again. Oh, I can hear now.
Okay.
Well, maybe I'm
Strange
controlling
that.
mute.
Yeah, when you mute Kalisha, everything goes off for me, including Adam.
I have all the power.
Yeah.
I love it. I
Anyway,
love mute.
yeah.
Sorry.
So one thing I've had experienced, Adam, is something Hugh Cairns sometimes asks me when I'm struggling with something. He will say, first of all, acknowledge the strain that I'm going through. I think that's one of the answers. Just to acknowledge that must be tough. I understand, or I've heard what you're saying. So that's not toxic positivity. That's just accepting that this is tough. And then he'll ask something like, "Tell me about a time when you had a similar problem, and you worked out a solution." So he's again going into my memory, and saying, "Can you come up with the answer?" For what you're dealing with. So it's not denying the problem. It's saying maybe you have the answer in yourself if only you look for it.
Well, I had lots more questions, but we're at the hour. So we're going to round off like we always do on our Salon sessions these days, which is for anybody who's watching this who's new, who doesn't know, we've trained an AI model just on the content from our website. So this isn't from the internet. This is the Dementia Researcher website has almost 3,000 pages of content now. This is over 600 blogs. We publish about 160 blogs every year from researchers. This is our 51st Salon webinar. All of these have been transcribed and all the transcriptions are in there. All of our 500 and some podcasts are in there. All the transcripts from those, all the articles and everything we've produced over the years is trained in AI. And every week I ask it to give me 10 top tips on the topic, learning from everything we've talked about on this before. So let's test Kalisha now and Michael and see if they picked up on everything that to see if what we already have from our website agrees. So number 1 in the top 10 was ask, don't tell. Ta-da! I think Michael, Tim, you both did that. Coaching is built on open-ended questions instead of offering advice or sharing your experience, because that's mentoring. So asking questions like what's holding you back from taking that next step, or what would success look like in this situation, are key things that you would ask if you were a coach, and could be expected to be asked if you were being coached, or questions you might ask yourself if you want to kind of go through that. So well done, tick, I think, for that one. Number 2, focus on short-term actionable goals. Again, you picked up on this. Coaching is about helping someone get unstuck or from a particular issue, not mapping their entire career. Clarify specific challenges and set measurable objectives with a defined time frame is what it came up with. Number 3, be fully present. Good coaching requires active listening without interruption, judgment, or solution offering. That means noticing tone, pauses, and unspoken concerns. Number 4, use silence as a tool. Resist the urge to fill gaps. Silence gives the other person space to think, often revealing insights they didn't know they had. And I think that could be that.
I think, like I said, Adam, when Hugh Cairns did that with me, it put me on the spot. And I'm sitting there thinking, I have to say something. And it makes you, as a coachee, it makes you dig deep into it. Well, what is it then? And then something just pops up, the answer.
And I think you can use that in mentoring as well. If you're a mentor to somebody, exactly the same thing. I'm too quick to jump in and offer solutions. Rather, I know I am. That's my own self-reflection on this session today. Number 5, reflect, don't direct. I think this talks to the toxic positivity thing we just talked about. Instead of saying you should, you can say things like, it sounds like you're considering this, or have you noticed what happens when? Number 6, create accountability, not dependence. Help them choose an action and then set a follow-up. Coaching builds on self-direction, not resilience on external validation. Number 7 is keep context specific. I think this is a bit of a duplication. Unlike mentoring, coaching happens in the moment. And we can talk about this as well. We talk about this like reflecting immediately on something that happens quickly. I think timely is an element that we've touched on today. Don't slip into mentoring for moments when you're tempted to share similar experiences. Use tools like Grow, the goal, reality, options, way forward. I'd not heard of that before, but apparently it's a program. And coactive coaching models can provide structure and keep sessions focused. And end with clarity. Number 10, always wrap up with a clear next step that comes from that person, even if small momentum matters. So get them to say, right, you tell me now what happens next. Get them to say it. Don't, action list. I think I did have some from Formula One World as well. The Formula One World, we had a look at the Dan Sims session that, but we haven't got time to go into that now. Go watch that video from Dan. He talks about coaching drivers when they're at their lowest and the things that they talk about. But also coming back to that thing about life coach, about trying to keep you being the best possible researcher that you can be, so that when you go to work and you are stressed and you've not eaten particularly well that month and you have not been sleeping particularly well and you've avoided doing those things in life that keep you active, like maybe it's running or swimming or getting a good night's sleep, making sure that you take lessons from those sports coaches that keep you being the best self you can be, so that when you go to work on Monday morning, you are, at the top of your game. And I think we can all take it. That's more, we're slipping into well-being, but I think a coach,
there's
a
an important
performance
point
coach
here.
would tell you that those things are important.
There's an important point here, Adam. One thing they told us on the training. It's important with a new coachee to have the discussion up front, to encourage them to think about the areas where they want to draw the boundary, about areas they do not want to go. Because none of us work, we don't work in a bubble. We have other things going on in our lives. It could be, also anything from I overslept this morning or whatever, it's trivial, relatively small stuff like that, to, oh, my marriage is on the rocks. And not everybody wants to disclose everything. There's no reason why they should either. So you just got to encourage people to say, if ever we reach the point where you don't want to go there, you just say. But beyond up to that point, then it makes it possible to talk about things from outside work that are affecting the workplace environment and figure out a way to deal with them that enables them to do their work better.
Well, I hope today's session, thank you, Michael, has persuaded you all that in addition to having a mentor in your life, which you all should have at least one of, ideally more, that you should go seek out somebody who can provide some coaching as well to help you focus on some specific issues that you might need to address in your career or in your research or in your life. That coaching clearly has its place, and I think Michael and Kalisha are both persuaded us of that today, and I'm convinced. But thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. We'll post links to any of the resources and things we've posted today. And I'd like to thank the incredible Dr. Kalisha Bonds-Johnson and the unstoppable Professor Michael Coleman, who I'm hope will be back in the Salon again later this year. And next week, we'll be back at 8 p.m. in the evening again to talk about the importance of equity, diversity and inclusion. And we'll be joined by Dr. Yolanda Onheen from Manchester University and Dr. Hamid Haroon, also from Manchester, talking about their experiences and work on EDI as well and on access. So thank you so much. We'll see you all again next week in the Salon. Thank you.
Bye.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.